Mario is one of the most beloved characters in the history of video games. Since the 80s, practically every generation grew up jumping on Goombas, entering green pipes, and rescuing the princess time and time again. But when that same character tried to leave the console and enter film or television, the story was very different. Over the years, there were various adaptations that left Nintendo with its pants down for decades. Experiments so utterly disastrous that the company was forced to make a brutal decision. But still, against all expectations, Mario made his return. Now he is more present than ever, and both adults and children are eagerly awaiting a new adventure from the Red Plumber. Today we are going to take a look back at the history of Mario outside of video games, and let me tell you right now that it is not a straight line. It is a complex chain of events that, for better or for worse, ended up changing everything. Before the very first Mario movie was ever even conceived as an idea, Mario was already a major cultural anomaly. We are not just talking about a famous character here, we are talking about a global symbol. His debut arrived in 1981 with Donkey Kong, right in the golden age of arcades, a time when there wasn't yet that strong sense of a shared universe and continuity as we understand it today. Back then, Mario wasn't quite the Mario we know. He was a carpenter named Jumpman, whose mission was to rescue his girlfriend, Pauline. Nintendo didn't realize it at the time, but it was already in the process of creating a truly recognizable icon within a medium that was just beginning to learn how to communicate with the world. 2 years later, in 1983, the Mario Bros. Arcade arrived, and something key was completed. He's no longer a cameo in someone else's game, now he's the protagonist with Luigi. And that's where the brand's heart begins to form. The duo, the brothers' identity, and the first steps towards something greater. The real breakthrough arrives between late 1985 and early 1986, when Super Mario Bros. Becomes the NES's flagship title in the United States. That cartridge doesn't just sell, it truly defines the adventure of journeying through the Mushroom Kingdom, collecting power-ups and epic abilities. Suddenly, the console ceases to be just another one, transforming into the very device that brings the entire world and language of Nintendo right into your home. In the United States, nearly 9 million Super Mario Bros. Cartridges were sold, a significant triumph for Mario and for its creator, Shigeru Miyamoto. Mario ceased to be just a game and truly became a major brand, generating profits of $500 million each year. It was a phenomenon of consumption, identity, and public presence. And for companies, the logical step was to advance to the next level, to conquer the other screen, that of film and television, with all that it entails. Believe it or not, Mario's first film wasn't made in Hollywood, but in Japan, and it ended up lost in a rather strange corner of the character's history. The film is titled Super Mario Bros. The Great Mission to Rescue Princess Peach, and it premiered on July 20th, 1986. It was produced by the studio Grouper Productions, right in the midst of the Famicom phenomenon's explosion in Japan. The anime story is, in its essence, an expanded version of the original game. Mario works as just an ordinary guy in the real world, playing his Famicom until suddenly something quite bizarre occurs. Princess Peach literally emerges from the video game and into the real world, closely followed by Bowser. In a matter of minutes, Mario and Luigi end up traversing pipes that act as portals, arriving at the Mushroom Kingdom to try and rescue her before Bowser can marry her. It's a simple plot, but it achieves something important. It attempts to transform the game's minimalism into a full-fledged adventure. The film's tone is curious because it blends fidelity with experimentation. On one hand, enemies, music, and elements directly recognizable from the game appear. The Mushroom Kingdom is full of familiar creatures, but the script also takes some rather unusual liberties. You'll find new characters, creatures that had never appeared in the video games, and situations that feel like they're pulled more from the anime of the period than from the Nintendo universe. You'll even find some completely absurd moments, such as Luigi consuming mushrooms in a much more realistic way than we typically see in the game, something that today would be completely impossible to show in quite that manner. One of the most curious details is that elements now classic to the Mario universe appear here before they were established in video games. For example, certain character actions during the final fight anticipate movements that would later appear in games like Super Mario 64 years later. Meaning, the movie didn't just take ideas from the game, it also ended up influencing how that world would be represented in the future. Nintendo accompanied the launch with an enormous amount of promotional material, including manga, puzzle books, illustrated phones, watches, rice containers, ramen, cassette soundtracks, and vinyl records with original themes. A whole small ecosystem of products designed to capitalize on the moment Mario was exploding in popularity in Japan. And yet, despite all that effort, the film was only a moderate success. It never had an international release and barely reached the West, remaining a curiosity for niche fans. By the late 80s, Mario was already too big to stay only within video games, and Nintendo knew it. So, in 1989, there was launched one of the most unusual experiments in the entire history of the character, the Super Mario Bros. Super Show, a production created by DIC Entertainment, the very same studio responsible for popular cartoons of that era, such as Inspector Gadget and Captain Planet. The core concept of the program was as bizarre as it was incredibly ambitious. It wasn't merely an animated series, it was a unique blend of formats that perfectly captured the essence of late 80s children's television. On the one hand, you had live-action segments where Mario and Luigi appeared as Brooklyn plumbers, living through absurd situations on a set that seemed straight out of a sitcom. Mario was played by Lou Albano, a former professional wrestling manager, and Luigi by Danny Wells. The two of them were acting like an exaggerated version of New York Italians, with cartoonish accents and dialogue that felt much more like a comedy sketch than a traditional television series. After that, the program would completely change its tone and switch to the animated cartoon where Mario, Luigi, Princess Peach, and Toad would travel through the Mushroom Kingdom, confronting King Koopa and his army. In that segment, many of the video game's elements truly appeared. Classic enemies, music inspired by the games, and settings that attempted to resemble the universe players knew from the NES. The program aired 65 episodes in 1989, and it was significant due to a particular detail that might seem minor now, but at that specific moment, it certainly was not. It marked one of the very first times the public consistently heard the English voices of these characters. Lou Albano's portrayal in particular became a cultural touchstone for an entire generation, even with promotional appearances and public messages where the actor continued wearing Mario's cap and mustache. The series' success led DIC to continue with more animated productions. First came The Adventures of Super Mario Bros. 3, a series which incorporated elements from the game of the very same name, the Koopalings, the special suits, and the distinct themed worlds. Not long after, Super Mario World made its debut, now firmly based within the Super Nintendo's universe, featuring the introduction of Yoshi and the iconic Dinosaur Land. The overall tone remained consistent: simple humor, engaging episodic adventures, and a clearly family-friendly approach. The voices changed. Mario was portrayed by Walker Boone, Luigi by Tony Rosato, and Princess Peach by Tracy Moore. But the overall spirit remained very much the same. And while none of these productions can truly be considered an animation masterpiece, today they are remembered with great affection, and also for understanding something crucial. Mario's world was colorful, exaggerated, and at times quite absurd, but also very easy to enjoy. In the early 90s, Hollywood began to pay close attention to something that, until that moment, hadn't seemed so obvious: that franchises designed for children could become enormous cinematic successes. The clearest example arrived in 1989, when Batman dominated the global box office and transformed the character into a gigantic cultural phenomenon. Despite its dark Tim Burton aesthetic, the success gave way to an avalanche of toys, clothing, video games, and merchandise that was generated around it. Suddenly, the studios understood that a strong brand could function as the engine for an entire commercial machine. The very next year, something quite similar happened with the Ninja Turtles. It was another immediate cinematic hit, and every kid had their favorite character. The formula was simple: take a character popular with young audiences, turn them into a live-action version, surround them with special effects, and craft a story blending humor, action, and a touch of darkness. It was at that very moment when Mario's name truly began to gain significant traction. Nintendo then started to receive numerous proposals from various studios interested in adapting the game's universe for the big screen. The company carefully reviewed several different projects, but what they were truly seeking was not necessarily a direct literal adaptation. The priority was different: to capitalize on the character's cultural reach and experiment with its potential to become a massive exposure for the brand. Finally, in October of 1990, Nintendo made a decision that would open a huge and also quite dangerous door. The cinematic rights for Mario were sold to the production company Leitmotif for approximately $2 million. The agreement had a particularly interesting clause: Nintendo retained all the merchandising rights. This meant that they could benefit financially from any commercial expansion or tie-in related to the movie, but they essentially left it to Hollywood to take on the challenge of transforming that beloved world into a truly unique and compelling story. And it was, but not in a good way. The adaptation that finally made it to the big screen in 1993 was something no one had ever witnessed before. Super Mario Bros., a live-action movie starring Bob Hoskins as Mario and John Leguizamo as Luigi. At first glance, it appeared to be an enormous gamble. It was the first time a popular video game tried to become a live-action movie blockbuster. But from its conception, the project took a quite unexpected turn. Instead of recreating the vibrant, colorful world of the Mushroom Kingdom, the film crafted a narrative that skillfully blended science fiction, urban dystopia, and a distinct cyberpunk aesthetic. The story kicks off in Brooklyn, where Mario and Luigi are working as plumbers until they eventually cross a mysterious portal that transports them to an entirely different dimension. That alternative world, which is known as Dinohattan, is governed by a society that is made up of evolved descendants of dinosaurs, and they are led by the ruthless dictator King Koopa, who is played by Dennis Hopper. The film's explanation for this is that the meteorite which wiped out the dinosaurs must have opened up a parallel dimension where evolution took a completely different path. Just from the synopsis, we already encounter several issues, because in attempting to justify this entire universe with a realistic logic, the film ended up deviating almost completely from the original source material. Instead of a fantastic kingdom filled with mushrooms, pipes, and absurd creatures, what we see on screen is a dark city full of neon lights, industrial factories, and futuristic vehicles. The game's classic enemies were also radically reinterpreted. Goombas, for example, stopped being small, mushroom-shaped creatures to become aberrations with tiny heads and giant bodies, the result of a genetic involution process within the story. The narrative itself also departs significantly from the games. Instead of a straightforward adventure to rescue the princess, the film introduces concepts such as meteorite fragments capable of merging dimensions, political conspiracies within a dystopian city, and experiments involving inverse evolution. The princess here isn't Peach, but Daisy. She doesn't live in a Mushroom Kingdom castle, but is an archaeology student in New York who gets involved in the conflict between both worlds. Forget the adorable look of the Yoshi from the games, because here you have a dinosaur that looks like it wants to go extinct. And curiously enough, the character of Luigi takes on a more prominent role than Mario. You know, the very guy whose name is featured in the film's title and the games themselves. Ultimately, the outcome was a movie that bore the name, featured the characters, and included certain nods to the video game, but which, in its very essence, appeared to belong to an entirely different universe, a grotesque experiment that would ultimately end in the worst possible way. If the movie itself was already quite bizarre on screen, what occurred behind the scenes was even more chaotic. From the very beginning of the project, Super Mario Bros. Transformed into a sort of experiment lacking any clear direction. The script passed through so many different hands that, even years later, many of those involved had significant trouble reconstructing exactly which version of the screenplay was written first and which one arrived later. The only thing that seemed absolutely certain was that almost all the key positions within the production team had changed at least once throughout the entire process. The first significant script was penned by Barry Morrow, the very same screenwriter who had previously won an Oscar for Rain Man. His story envisioned an adventure focused on the bond between Mario and Luigi, two distinctly different brothers who ultimately learned from each other throughout their journey. However, Nintendo was not entirely satisfied with that particular version, and so the entire project went back into a thorough review. New screenwriters were hired to find a balance between fantasy, humor, and sci-fi, and each version seemed to push the film in a different direction. Adding to that instability were changes in direction. At one point during development, the project went to the duo of Rocky Morton and Annabelle Jankel, known for creating the character Max Headroom. Their idea was to transform Mario's universe into a darker story. That vision greatly influenced Dinohattan's visual design, but it also caused a constant clash between the director's wishes, the producer's demands, and Nintendo's expectations. The result was a production that seemed to move without a clear map. The scripts continued to change constantly, even when the actual filming was already well underway. In quite a few cases, the actors would receive brand new pages of the screenplay on the very same day of the actual filming. Entire scenes were being rewritten right there on the set, with screenwriters desperately trying to adjust the dialogues on the fly, while the technical crew was waiting around to turn on the cameras. With every new version of the screenplay, elements that had already been meticulously designed, such as the elaborate sets, the detailed costumes, and all the various props, would become completely outdated or simply lose their relevance within the evolving narrative of the story. The tension began to be palpable throughout the entire production team. Several cast members simply stopped attempting to memorize script changes, knowing full well they could be modified again just minutes later. Producers and directors were constantly arguing over the creative direction the movie ought to take. And while all of that was taking place, the clock just kept on ticking, and the budget continued to grow. Working on the film set was a complete and utter nightmare. As the production was reaching its very final stage, the entire project seemed like a jumble of ideas that never truly managed to integrate. Many different versions of the story had been tried and tested for the film, various visual approaches had been put through their paces, and the worst part of it all, they didn't even know who their intended target audience was, because there were jokes that were far too inappropriate and risque. In other words, Super Mario Bros. Was not merely a complicated film to adapt. It was a production where, at many points, it wasn't even clear what kind of movie they were trying to create. Ultimately, the film premiered in cinemas on May 28, 1993, and the audience's reaction was evident from that very first weekend. The opening weekend's box office was less than $10 million, and by the end of its theatrical run in cinemas, the film ended up grossing around $21 million in total. This figure is extremely harsh when compared to its $48 million production budget. In other words, it didn't even manage to recover half of that. The blow wasn't just commercial, the critical reception was a slow and public demolition. It was a film completely split in two, as if they had tried to force two entirely different products into the same package. Major media outlets specifically pointing to the very idea of a film split into two parts, perhaps achieving some isolated technical feat, but utterly lost as a cohesive experience. And in the more popular television review circuit, Siskel and Ebert ultimately branded it as one of the year's worst, giving it their famous thumbs down. In a context where the press still held immense cultural sway over a premiere's reputation, that kind of condemnation was like permanently branding it with a mark of failure. Nintendo, furthermore, had tried to play a very clever card to retain all the merchandising rights. In theory, this was meant to protect them. If the film performed well, the sales of toys, action figures, trading cards, clothing, and the entire associated ecosystem were set to explode. And indeed, there was a comprehensive line of merchandise: action figures, vehicles, playsets, even era-specific collectibles such as Pogs. But here, their strategy completely failed them. When the movie flopped, everything else came crashing down. What followed was almost a pre-programmed silence. Nintendo distanced itself from the film industry for decades, as if it had decided that this territory was a radioactive zone. While other franchises learned to coexist with adaptations, reboots, and shared universes, Nintendo remained steadfast. Even decades later, when cinema was filled with giant sagas and money-printing cinematic universes, the company stuck to the same logic, protecting its characters as if they were museum pieces or as if they were still trying to forget what happened the last time they dared. And that's the most striking thing of all. Just one movie was enough for Nintendo to treat cinema as a mistake never to be repeated. Nowadays, the 1993 film is widely considered a cult classic, a prime example of something so bad it's actually good, but for Nintendo and for its creator, Shigeru Miyamoto, it remains a significant failure they absolutely never wish to repeat. While the film industry seemed to put Mario's cinematic future on hold, the character himself certainly did not disappear or become any less relevant. In fact, quite the opposite occurred. During those very same years, the character continued to grow within the medium where it had always functioned best: video games. Generation after generation of consoles, it progressively broadened the scope of its world, incorporating new mechanics, fresh characters, and innovative methods to explore that expansive universe, which had initially begun as something quite straightforward. Mario 64, released in 1997, fundamentally redefined how 3D games are designed and controlled. Mario Galaxy, from 2007, boasts the most emotional story, expanding the universe to unknown realms. And Mario Odyssey, from 2017, is the series' peak, celebrating the franchise's 35th anniversary with a love letter to all players. And those are just a few examples, because the Red Plumber's list of games is endless. If we were to set aside the video games, the one product that truly managed to remain active throughout that entire period was undoubtedly the Super Mario manga series. This particular series commenced its monthly publication in the year 1990, penned by the talented Yukio Sawada, and it consistently continued for many decades, serving as a unique, humorous reinterpretation of the popular video games. In those stories, the manga would revisit events from the games, but would also add completely new situations that had never appeared in the original source material, while maintaining the slapstick tone that had always characterized the character. Curiously enough, despite its longevity, this manga series almost never left Japan. The only official publications outside the country appeared in France and Spain, where they were published under the names Super Mario Manga Adventures and Super Mario Adventures. Mario's presence on the big screen disappeared, But the character and his universe continue to expand, especially in Japan, where there are stores dedicated to Mario and even a giant amusement park, Super Nintendo World. Mario didn't need a movie. He remains one of the most recognizable characters in entertainment. But when you least expect it, an announcement appears that leaves us all completely stunned and surprised. In January of 2018, it was officially announced that Mario would be returning to the big screen in a brand new film produced by Illumination, in a collaborative effort with Universal Pictures. The studio's choice was certainly no coincidence. Illumination had already proven its ability to transform animated characters into massive global phenomena with popular franchises such as Despicable Me and the Minions. This time around, Nintendo wasn't aiming to experiment with anything too unusual or attempt to completely reinvent the iconic character of Mario. Instead, they were looking for something much more straightforward, an adaptation that audiences would instantly recognize and connect with. The production also made it clear from the start that this time the company would not repeat the mistakes of the past. One of the most important names involved in the project was Shigeru Miyamoto. Mario's creator himself was credited as producer and directly involved in the project's development, a first for any prior film adaptation. For Nintendo, it was a way to ensure the character maintained his identity through every creative decision. The voice cast also reflected a strategy very different from that of the 90s. The film brought together several well-known Hollywood figures: Chris Pratt as Mario, Charlie Day as Luigi, Anya Taylor-Joy as Princess Peach, Jack Black as Bowser, and Seth Rogen as Donkey Kong, among others. The idea was to construct a production with sufficient media presence to attract both the audience that had grown up with the games and new viewers who perhaps didn't have a direct connection to the character. After 3 decades away, Nintendo was making a comeback to the big screen, but this time with the clear intention of protecting and controlling its most important character. The highly anticipated premiere finally took place in April of 2023. The Super Mario Bros. Movie became widely available in all movie theaters, and from that very first moment, the strategy appeared to be working. The film debuted with truly enormous box office figures, and within just a few short weeks, it started to climb steadily up the global rankings for the year. What followed was something that very few video game adaptations had ever managed to achieve before: a sustained run in theaters that ultimately surpassed $1 billion in global box office revenue. A significant part of that success had everything to do with something the film understood exceptionally well. They successfully adapted a world that truly felt like it belonged to the games themselves. It drew directly upon all the iconic elements that had made the franchise so famous for decades: the Mushroom Kingdom, the Kong's own kingdom, Rainbow Road, all the familiar power-ups, the carts, and of course, the classic enemies. Absolutely everything appeared right there on screen, as if the entire world of video games had simply leaped straight into the cinematic format. The film was packed with nods to classic and modern games, as if telling fans, "We have over 40 years of history with this red plumber, and we're going to show you absolutely everything we've got." The story isn't anything to write home about. Mario and Luigi start their own business, but accidentally fall into a pipe that takes them to the Mushroom Kingdom, where they meet Princess Peach and have to defeat Bowser. The public's response was overwhelmingly positive. Many people who had grown up playing Mario immediately recognized the references, the settings, and the internal logic of the world that had been a part of their lives for generations. And for a younger audience, the film served as a perfect gateway into that rich universe Nintendo had been building since the 1980s. The success led to a sequel in 2026, Super Mario Galaxy Movie, now with the inclusion of Bowser Jr., Rosalina, and a Yoshi with the design we all love. Mario is dominating the big screen, and the funny thing is that the formula wasn't complicated. There was no need to turn the character into something different. All that was needed was to let Mario be Mario. The curious thing about this whole retrospective is that Mario never stopped growing. While the film industry came and went, while Hollywood tested new formulas or burned through franchises at the speed of light, the character kept doing the same thing as always: appearing in new games, conquering new generations, and staying at the top. No one will ever take away his title as the king of video games. The film industry, on the other hand, took over 30 years to discover the proper way to approach that world. Now that it has finally achieved that, the situation is entirely different, because Mario is no longer just a popular character. He is one of the strongest properties in the entire entertainment industry. And when a universe like this begins to expand into the world of cinema, the most interesting thing isn't the movie we've already seen. It's the sheer number of worlds that haven't yet appeared on screen. what new stories await us, and which characters we'll be seeing very soon. All right now, hit that like button hard, really hard, super hard. And please, don't ever forget to rewind the tape. Drop your thoughts on the movies in the comments. Don't forget to smash that like button to rewind the tape, and we'll see you in the next one.